It is the beginning of the week of Christmas, or we're heading into that. This is the weekend before. And I have not done any holiday baking yet, so I am in a mad scramble to try to get some cookies done. That's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be doing 5 or 6 different Christmas cookie recipes, our family favorites. And these are going to be enjoyed a little in home, but they're mostly going to be, you know, for those occasions when you're invited somewhere and you want to bring something and they say, oh, no, just bring yourself. We don't need anything. You'll have a plate of cookies ready to take. Or also, I will be giving them to my Azure Standard driver in January. We always like to bring a little treat, every month for pickup, and not everybody in the group participates, so I always have a backup plan. They're also great to put in the freezer and to pull out later in the year if you have guests. All of these are freezer-friendly recipes. So we are going to jump right in, and we are going to start with chocolate crinkle cookies. These are absolutely delicious, and they require a few hours to set up in the refrigerator. So we're going to start with that dough and get that chilling before we move on to another. So let's get started. I'm going to be using my stand mixer for this, and I'm going to use my whisk attachment. And this recipe, all of these recipes are really easy. If you have a pantry stocked pretty well, you should have all of these ingredients on hand if you would like to whip these up along with me. So for the chocolate crinkle cookies, we are going to be using 2 cups of sugar, 1 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder, 1/2 of a cup of vegetable oil, 4 room temperature eggs, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, 2 cups of flour, and this is fluffed up before it's measured, 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt, and 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and that's it. So to get started, we're going to put the sugar and the cocoa powder into the mixing bowl. And if I didn't already say it, welcome back to my channel where I focus on food. And today is about baking, and I am not a baker. I can whip something together, as you'll see, but baking is not my forte. I'm usually more of a cook than a bake, but 'tis the season, and for my family and friends and coworkers, I want to have something available. All right, so sugar, cocoa powder, and oil into your bowl. You can use a hand mixer if you don't have a stand mixer. I'm just going to lock this in, and we're just going to get that mixed together. Because I'm using a stand mixer and I don't want the cocoa powder and the sugar to go flying everywhere, I start off on a low speed and then I can bring it up. And then I'm just going to scrape down the sides of that bowl just to make sure that everything is getting incorporated. I can see some of the dark cocoa is kind of clinging to the sides here. And some of the sugar is still definitely in the bottom well of the bowl. So we're just scraping down those sides. And now I'm going to put 1 egg at a time in. I'm just dropping those eggshells right into my measuring cups that are no longer being used. That's looking good. So I'm going to go in with 2 teaspoons of the vanilla extract. And I have a second bottle here on standby because I think we're going to finish this one off with this recipe. Just about. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. That is well mixed and it smells chocolatey and lovely already. Now I'm going to put 2 cups of flour in a separate bowl with 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt. And 2 teaspoons of baking powder, but my teaspoon spoon now has vanilla on it. So I'm going to do 4 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder. And then I'm just going to get those mixed together. And I'm just using a Danish dough whisk. You can use a fork. You can use another type of whisk. Just, you want to get them just mixed well together before we pour them in with the rest of the batter. Now we're going to add the dry mixture over here to the wet mixture, but we're going to add it in gradually. So I'm going to use a large spoon to do that. Just an oversized spoon. So I'm going to turn this back on to about a medium. And when it's about almost all the way mixed through, I add more. Now I'm going to scrape down those sides again and just pour the rest of the flour into the mixing bowl. Smells really chocolatey. And while that finishes mixing, I'm just going to get this bowl wiped out, because we're going to put the batter in here to refrigerate for 3 or 4 hours. That looks like frosting. It smells chocolatey and amazing. So I'm just going to use my spatula to help it off of this whisk. And to transfer it from this bowl over to this bowl. This is very thick. You definitely want to use a firm spatula when working with this. It's really thick batter. With our batter in a bowl, I'm just going to give that plastic wrap cover, stick it in the fridge while we move on to cookie dough number 2. Next up, we are going to make some caramel shortbread squares, also known as Millionaire shortbread. And I don't have a 9 by 9 inch pan. I have a bunch of 8 by 8s, and so that's what I'm going to use. But typically, it would be done in a 9 by 9 pan, and we're going to make the shortbread first. Really simple to make shortbread. I have 1 1/4 cup of flour that I'm going to put in the mixing bowl. 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. And then I need 2/3 of a cup of softened butter. So I took all my eggs out and all my butter out that I was going to need for all of these recipes this morning. So the eggs are room temp and the butter has been softened. And here's a chart I put together that helps with some baking conversions. And these I'm just going to cut down a little bit. It is softened, but rather than stick a whole big block of butter in there, I'll cut it down. Shortbread is one of my favorite cookie recipes because it's not all that sweet, so I do like it. Of course, we're going to be making a caramel sauce and then melting some chocolate over the top of that. And the caramel sauce is going to be homemade. So if you don't know how to make caramel sauce, stick around. And I hope that I will do a good job and not burn it. Like I said, I'm not a baker per se, but when it comes to the holidays, you know, everybody likes a little treat. You like the house to smell like good food, good baked goods. We're just gonna get this well combined. So I'm gonna lock that down. And again, starting on a lower speed before I jack it up so that the sugar doesn't and the flour don't go flying everywhere. So getting that butter mixed in with the flour first. I've got the oven now preheated to 350 degrees, and this is just about done. It's actually pretty well combined at this point. So I'm gonna just go in there with my hands and get it mixed the rest of the way. And then we're just gonna press it into this baking dish. Again, I wish I had a 9x9. I need to make a list. I need a smaller pie pan and I need true 9x9s. All I have are 8x8s. All right, so it did a pretty good job of mixing it together, but I'm just gonna get in there and make sure that that butter is well combined with the flour and that little bit of sugar. And I'll pop up the recipe card right here in case you're interested in making these. They are so good. That looks pretty good. So I'm just gonna put it in the baking dish. And then this you just flatten down. Now this is gonna be a little thicker than it should be just because this is an 8x8, so smaller than a 9x9. So it's just gonna be a little thicker. And I think that will be just fine. I'm just gonna have to watch the baking time. And you don't necessarily need it up the sides. This is gonna be like a layered cookie, so it's not like a crust. I'm gonna take a spatula at this point and just make sure that it is nice and smooth and even all along the bottom of the pan. So I'm really getting it up into that corner and pushing down. Nice and firm, which is leveling it out. That looks great. Now I'm just gonna pop that in the oven for, it says 20 minutes. I'm gonna check it after 15, just because it's not a 9x9 and also because oven times can always vary. I know mine runs a little hot. Caramel's really easy to make. I'm gonna use a saucepan and I'm gonna add to that 1/2 cup of softened butter. This is a whole cup, so I'm just gonna cut it in half. Let me go ahead and get that starting to melt on the stove over a medium heat. To that, I am going to add 1/2 cup of packed light brown sugar. And light brown sugar is just granulated sugar that you add some molasses to until it gets to the color that you want. And dark brown is more molasses. So super easy to make your own brown sugar. When I was younger and would try my hand at baking, I didn't often have the ingredients on hand like brown sugar or confectioner's sugar because I don't bake a lot. And then you have to run to the store and it's such a pain. But when you learn how to make them yourself, it's easy. Just keep sugar on hand. Sugar doesn't even go bad. So when you want brown sugar, add molasses. When you want powdered sugar, put it in your blender and blend it into powder. It's as simple as that. All right, and then I want 2 tablespoons of light corn syrup. Which is thick and sticky and takes a minute to come out of the bottle. There's 1 and 2. 1/2 cup of condensed and sweetened milk, which is also thick and syrupy like. And if you can't find another recipe to add this to, the remainder of the can, use it in a coffee drink. You know, make a specialty coffee drink that's a little bit sweet with this. It'll be delicious. Once we have mixed it through completely, we want to let it boil for 5 minutes. Switching over to a sturdier spoon here, so a wooden spoon. Now it does look separated in here and that's fine. As soon as this comes off the heat, we're gonna stir constantly for 2 to 3 minutes until this solidifies and we have some caramel. And we are gonna stir constantly. The stirring is cooling it down and making sure that everything incorporates well as it cools into the caramelly state. Now the caramel is done, we are just going to pour that over the top of this shortbread. It's very pliable, very soft and silky right now. We're going to use this little spatula here to help spread it evenly across that shortbread. And then gravity should do the rest to smooth it out. And then we'll go ahead and give that a little taste. That's caramel. It's good. All right, now this has to sit at room temperature until that caramel hardens, so a couple of hours. Next up is oatmeal spice cookies. So think oatmeal with a pumpkin pie flavor. We're gonna start by just creaming together some of the sugars, butters, and eggs. So I'm gonna use the paddle attachment. And we're starting with 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, 1 cup of packed brown sugar, so I'll do 2 of the 1/2 cups. And I might have to make some more brown sugar today. Half a cup of softened butter. And 1/2 cup of the butter flavored shortening, which I did have to buy for this recipe because I don't keep this on hand, but Best Buy is 2 years from now because it came with 3 sticks, and I only need 1/2 of this for 1/2 cup. I wish I knew how to duplicate this without having to use shortening. If you know, please let me know in the comments below. I do have lard, I do have tallow, both of those homemade, and I do have butter flavoring. I just, I didn't want to take a chance. I haven't played around with that recipe yet, so I'm using this, and I just need 1/2 of it. But I will cut it down just like the butter. Yeah, so if you're better at baking than I am, and you know how I can eliminate shortening from the recipe, please let me know. Next, we need a teaspoon of vanilla, so I'll use what's left in this bottle. And 2 eggs. And I'll be washing out these shells because they will become part of my garden once they dry and I run them through my blender. Now we're just going to cream all of this together until smooth. All right, that looks pretty good. I let that go for a few minutes while I gathered up the rest of the ingredients. So this is very soft and whipped at this point. Looks and smells delicious. All right, now we're gonna mix our dry ingredients together. So 1.5 cups of flour. And this, again, is fluffed up flour where, then I've scooped it and leveled it off. That's about as close to measuring by weight as you can get. We need a teaspoon of cinnamon, which I'm gonna have to refill my jar here pretty soon. So a teaspoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and half a teaspoon of ground cloves. I only have whole cloves, and they are pungent. So I'm just gonna grab a few, put them in my mortar and pestle here, and get those ground down real quick. This only takes a minute. And I probably won't even use the full amount because these are gonna be much more flavorful and aromatic than spices that you buy pre-ground at the store. Just gonna use a little bit because it is strong. I'm gonna mix that together. This does a nice job of incorporating everything together without it blowing all over the place, which happens when I use a regular whisk. So I definitely like the Danish dough whisk. And then we're going to slowly add this back to here with it turned on. Make sure it is locked. And I've got it on a medium speed. Now we're going to add in the last 2 ingredients. We need 3 cups of rolled oats and 1 cup of raisins. And hopefully I have enough oats, otherwise I have to go get them from upstairs. Now I keep these raisins in my refrigerator. I like them in salads. But they're cold, so they definitely stick together, so I'm going to have to loosen some up. That looks good. I'm going to add those in. I'll let that mix for just a second, but we're going to have to get in there with our hands and make sure everything is evenly distributed because it's pushing it up against the sides. All right, let's just get in there with our hands and get her done. These also bake at 350 degrees, so the oven is perfect temp. So it did a pretty good job of mixing it. I'm just going to make sure everything is thoroughly mixed together by getting in here with my hands. And it cooks on an ungreased cookie sheet, but because these are the light colored ones, I feel like they burn more. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw some parchment paper down on the bottom just to make sure that they don't burn. And I'm just using a teaspoon to get a nice, round shape, leaving plenty of room for them to spread out as they cook, which is why I am using the larger sheet. You could do big cookies here if you wanted to. You can do smaller cookies if you wanted to. It's really based on your preference. I'm going to do 4 across. You just want to make sure that your cookies are fairly uniform in size so that they cook evenly for the same amount of time across the pan. If you do a really small one and a really big one, the really small one is going to be done sooner than the really big one. So just try to keep them roughly the same size. When my son was younger, I used to do the sugar cookies that you would, decorate and frost. I have lost all patience with that over the years. Maybe when he has kids and there's grandkids, that'll be something fun to do. But otherwise, I just like getting it done. I like how the house smells when you're baking. I love having these options to pull out of the freezer as you get company around the holidays, to create a cookie tray to give out to friends and family and coworkers, and just to have a sweet treat available if you so desire. Now I could fill a second sheet and cook these at the same time so that I could do the whole batch in one go, but I feel like that changes the cooking time. So I'm just gonna do one sheet, just do a final round at the end later, just to bake all of the dough off. So not a bad way to spend an afternoon the weekend before Christmas, especially if you do have kids or family in town. This is always something that is nice to do together. It's just fun, building those holiday traditions and memories. I'm just kind of staggering this last row. I think I can get a little more than if I did a straight row. And this is about half the dough, so we'll count how many these were. Twenty-one cookies here, and that was about half the dough. So 40-something cookies in all for your spiced oatmeal raisin. These are going to go in for 10 to 12 minutes, so I will check them at 9 just to be sure. Next up, I'm going to make Thumbprint cookies. Now, these are one of my favorite, and it gives me the opportunity to use up some of the jam that I have preserved in years past. I am down to my last jar. It's a little more than half filled of my raspberry mango jam, which is a ball book recipe that I did in 2022. So it's 2 years old, and this is my last jar. So I should be making more of this in 2025, but this is such a delicious jam. I gave a lot of it away as gifts, and when I had family here over the summer, this was the go-to. Everybody just loved it, and I don't eat a lot of jam, but with these cookies, it is just such a nice addition to them. The flavor just pairs really well with the taste of this vanilla in the cookie dough. It's just lovely. So this is another super easy recipe. And we are going to start with 1 full cup of butter. And because this butter is super soft, I'm just going to add it straight in along with the sugars. And we're going to be using 1/3 of a cup of each brown and white granulated sugar, so about 70 grams of each. 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, 1/3 cup of firmly packed light brown sugar. And I'm going to start out at a medium to low speed just to get it started. And that's whipping together well, but I am going to go ahead and stop it just after a few seconds and make sure that the sides of the bowl are scraped down so all of that butter is mixing with the sugar. It looks pretty good in here, but it's always a good idea to scrape down the sides to make sure everything is incorporating well. To that, I am going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla, more or less, depending on your preference. Some people really like vanilla. And then 1 egg yolk. And again, I'm going to make sure that the sides are scraped down so that everything is getting mixed together. That doesn't take but 30 to 60 seconds, and this looks really good. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And now we're going to do our dry ingredients. So I am using 2 1/4 cups of flour, which translates to about 270 grams of flour. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of cornstarch to that, and this is a 1/2 teaspoon measure, so I'll do 4. And 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now we're going to add that to the mixer with it on. And I've got that on a medium or a 4. And we're just going to add it slowly, and then we're going to help incorporate by scraping down the sides as it starts to load up on the sides. drop that down a little bit because we're losing some flour there. That's better. So now it's on a 2. And I can see some flour is kind of accumulating on the bottom in the well. So I'm just gonna mix everything through, scrape down the sides so everything incorporates evenly. Not much left in that bowl, so we're just going to toss that in. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. And our spiced oatmeal cookies should be done. These smell amazing. I'm just going to set these aside, let them cool for a few minutes before I put them on a rack. And this cookie also bakes at 350 degrees, so the oven is already ready for these. Now, you don't want your cookies to spread out too much because we want to make sure that we maintain that well in the center. So a couple of tricks for that. You want to make sure that you form these into some really smooth balls without any cracks in them. If they do crack when you go to make the indentation, you can always fix that with your fingers. The other trick is to make sure that your cookie sheet is cool. So you don't want to just use, one that you had just used in the oven because it might still have some warmth. If it does, that's going to cause that dough to start to kind of melt and your cookies are definitely going to spread out. I'm going to drop these by the tablespoon onto my parchment paper after I roll them into a smooth ball. And we're going to place them about an inch or so apart. And using a tablespoon is hopefully going to make sure that the cookies are all relatively the same size so they cook for the same amount of time in the oven. If you have, much larger cookie and a much smaller cookie on the same tray, then one will certainly be done sooner than the next. This dough is incredibly soft and sticky, which is normal. So what I'm going to do is once I have these on the cookie sheet, I'm going to pop them into the freezer and let them harden up for about 30 minutes before we do a different cookie. So that's going to make 3 of these that we had to chill before moving on to the next step. I think we got 19 altogether. I'll take it. To make the indentations, I'm just going to be using my melon baller because my tablespoons are, pretty big and I want the well in the center of the cookies. So I'm just going to press an indentation that would allow jam to be put in the center. And if your cookie dough cracks when you do this along the edges, you can just fix that with your fingers, smooth it back out. And there we have cookies with wells for jam. Now, when I fill my wells, I don't like to overfill them because I don't want the jam running on the outside of the cookie when they bake. So I put in just enough in the center here to come up just barely to the top of that well. And it's better to add too little and then, you can adjust a little bit more in because you definitely don't want the jam on the sides of the cookie. It just won't be as pretty and presentable otherwise. Those look perfect. And that took about half of a half-pint jar, just for reference. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get these in the freezer, and we are gonna move on to the next cookie. This next recipe is candy cane cookies. Now, little story behind this one. I had never even heard of these. I had never tried these until I moved to New York in 2002. And in my very first house that I bought, my next door neighbor was just the sweetest little lady. She was probably in her 80s. She had a family, but they had moved away, so she was by herself, and I was a single mom with a young child in tow, and I had just moved across country. So she did a few, nice special things for us. And our first Christmas there, she brought over a plate of candy cane cookies, which, again, I had never heard of, and they were just lovely, and my son really enjoyed them. And so I got the recipe, and we just love this cookie. It's probably a lot to do with the nostalgia, but regardless, in an ode to Marge, my neighbor, who likely isn't with us anymore, and I don't live anywhere near there anymore, thank you, Marge. Here are the candy cane cookies. So I'm gonna use a paddle attachment, and I am going to cream together the butter and the sugar. So here I have a half a cup of sugar, 1 cup of very softened butter that I'm just gonna cut down a little bit and get thrown in. We're going to do 1 room temperature egg in here as well. And some extracts. I'm gonna do vanilla, about 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. This is a half teaspoon measure, so half, 1, 1.5. And the recipe also calls for almond extract, which I'm not a huge fan of. It calls for 1 teaspoon. I'm gonna do a 1/4 teaspoon because it's my kitchen. They're going to be my cookies, and I'm just gonna do a tiny splash because I'm not the biggest fan of almond extract. I don't know what it is. And I am just gonna get those creamed together. All right, this recipe does use candy canes in it. So these are still wrapped in their individual wrappers, and I need to get them down into small pieces, even powder. So I'm just gonna put them in a Ziploc bag, and you can use a rolling pin for this. I have a meat tenderizer with a smooth side, and so I'm just going to crush these in their jackets. And the jackets are gonna pop right off. So we have 1 full wrapper, 2 full wrappers, and 3 full wrappers. And that is, I'm gonna pour that right here into this bowl. And if you have extra candy canes, which, by the way, this is a great little recipe to use up candy canes at the end of the season. If you have more than 3 available, you can always crush more up and just sprinkle them on top of the cookies when they come out. To that, I'm gonna add 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, which is 300 grams, and 1 teaspoon of salt. And then we're just gonna whisk that together really quick and then add it to our wet ingredients, or basically our butter. And if you have peppermint extract, which I do, and you want, a little extra pepperminty flavor, you can add that in here as well. So I'm gonna turn this back on to a 2 and get the flour added a little bit at a time to incorporate, with a spatula handy to scrape down the sides as needed. And I've turned the oven to 375 because that's the temperature that these cookies need to bake at. It's looking good. I don't even think we need to scrape down the sides. This looks really good. but we'll see. This is a really quick bake. It's only going to take about 9 minutes for these cookies to cook. I do caution you though that because of the amount of butter in here, you definitely want to use a cookie sheet that has not been recently used, or if you have recently used it, put it in the fridge, put it in the freezer, or stick it outside if you live somewhere cold like me, just to cool it down, because the heat of the baking sheet will start these cookies kind of melting, get the dough melting, and they'll spread out too far on your baking sheet. This looks pretty good. I do see just a little bit of flour here on the side, so I'm just gonna mix that in. And this is a pretty dough. It is a butter-colored dough with little bits of pink running through it from the peppermints. These need about 1 inch space, and we're going for about a tablespoon per cookie, just rolled into a ball. And they will spread some, but without it being a hot baking sheet, they shouldn't just completely flatten out. How do I know that? Ask me how I know that. I have made these before where I have used a hot baking sheet, like if I had done a round and then done another round, and I didn't let the sheet cool down in between, and I ended up with basically a full sheet pan of one large cookie. So learn from my mistakes. Cool your trays down in between your cookie batches, or rotate your trays. So I have 2 trays this size, and then I have a few trays that are smaller, which helps keep the assembly line going. I don't usually like to do more than 1 tray in the oven at one time because it adjusts the cooking time, I think. But again, I'm not a master baker. I'm not a master anything. In my experience, it adjusts the cooking time. Like, you can't tell for sure that they're going to be done in 9 minutes or 11 minutes. So, and same thing if you get different size cookies on your pan as well. I'm probably making these a little bigger than I need to, just like on some of the others, but I'm okay with that. I don't need a million cookies. I just don't need to share that many, and we certainly don't need that many here. So making them a little bit bigger. If you wanted to, you could also roll these in some powdered sugar before you baked them. I have seen recipes that call for that, but I think they're fine without it, and I don't want to add more sugar if you don't have to. This is a lot of sugar we're dealing with today. I have my flour and my sugar bucket out. I've just been dipping into those all day to make these recipes, and it's a lot of sugar. So I'm just gonna do 1 tray of these for right now. I'll finish up the extra later because I have other extras I need to do still as well. And it's gonna be a long video. Voila. All right, these only need 9 minutes in the oven, so I'm gonna get those in, and we are gonna get the ingredients out for our last cookie, which will be Snickerdoodles. I'm still setting up for the Snickerdoodles, but time has just gone off on the candy cane cookies. And these don't get brown on top, so you really just have to trust the time on there. Make sure that you don't make the cookies too big. So these look lovely. And when we're all done, I'll give you a close-up of everything. So now I'm gonna increase the oven temp to 400 degrees while we mix up the batter for the Snickerdoodles and Snickerdoodles. All right, so for the Snickerdoodles, I had to use all of those pieces of the butter I cut down and made sure that I had a cup, which I think was 198 grams. I had to look it up. So we've got enough butter here. I'm I'm gonna put that in my bowl. And sugar is 1.5 cups, so I'm gonna add that. And 2 eggs in with the butter and the sugar. All right, 330 grams of flour, all purpose. I'm going to measure that out because 2 3/4 cups of flour, you know, I'm not gonna be able to get that perfect in here. And when you're baking, measurements are kind of important. So 330 grams. And to that, I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar. I'm using a smaller one so I can get it in there. So that is 1/2, 1, 1/2, 2. 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And 1/4 teaspoon of salt. On a 2, so the flour doesn't fly everywhere, I'm just gonna start adding that in. And the rest of this I can just pour right in. And now that the flour has incorporated into that butter and it's not gonna go flying everywhere, I'm just gonna turn that up. We wanna go until it's just incorporated, which is about now. Go ahead and turn that off. Let's take a look at our dough. Dogs just got back from a nice long walk. Beautiful dough. I'm done with this. I have one more thing to make before we can get these on trays. The last thing we need is a cinnamon sugar dust on these cookies. So it's just equal parts of cinnamon, equal parts of sugar. So I'm just gonna do a tablespoon of sugar. This is probably overkill, but at this point, most of my teaspoons, tablespoons, and the such are dirty. I've kept washing things in between, but this is our last one. So we're gonna mix a little extra together and just mix that around. All right, I've got a very cooled pan here that I've kept away from the hot stove until now. And I'm just gonna make tablespoon drops into balls, roll them, pass them through the cinnamon sugar, and drop them onto the cookie sheet. Again, I'm gonna be making these just a little bit bigger, although I still feel like I'm gonna have extra. But that's okay, because I have other cookies I still need to bake off later tonight anyway. Tablespoon. Roll this really soft dough into the cinnamon sugar. And these are gonna spread a little bit, so I'm gonna try for 4 across on a couple rows. I think they're gonna end up spreading into each other, so I'll taper it down to 3. I just want to get as many done as I can. And if they spread together, I'll just save those ones for here. Of course, I could make them smaller and they probably wouldn't spread together. I guess size matters depending on, you know, what you're trying to do and present. If you're trying to get a whole ton of cookies done, to have a lot of different cookie platters to offer out or bring to parties, you'll want to do them smaller. This is gonna make a lot of cookies, even though I'm making them, you know, kind of bigger. We still have a lot of dough left in there and only a couple more rows on this sheet to do. Oh, I can move them up a bit. Maybe we'll do every other row like that. My dogs want food. They want their dinner. So when I pop these in the oven, I'm gonna clean up and get them fed before I have to take these out. All right, I'm gonna get these baked off. We still have quite a bit of dough in here, but these only take 7 minutes in the oven. So I'll see you back in 7. Our 7-minute timer just went off. Let's take a peek at these. Those look fantastic and they smell amazing. Here is our very cold tray of raspberry mango thumbprint cookies, and we are just gonna pop those into the oven for about 11 minutes. I'll see you back here in 11 minutes. I'm gonna get some dishes done, get things tidied up because we're almost done, almost, but not quite. 11 minutes exactly. Let's see how we did. We did have a little bit of jam spillage. I'll give you a look at that. But they held up pretty well. They held their shape. They've got their wells in the center. Again, these are probably bigger than they should be. That's just what happens when, you know, you don't bake a lot. It's kind of like trying to bake bread when you hardly bake bread or something like that. It's not perfect. Baking takes practice, so, but I don't care. And you shouldn't either. These are holiday treats that you're gonna share with friends and family. They're gonna taste spectacular, even if they don't look exactly perfect. And around the holidays, it's the thought that counts, right? I mean, this is a baking marathon day. This is an all-day bake, and I'm thrilled with the results. So let me give you a close-up. So here you can see the jam spilled out, and right here as well. That's okay. The rest look really, really good. Now, these are really soft. They're gonna have to sit on here for a few minutes to harden up before I move them over to a cooling rack, but not a bad job. I think these look fantastic, and that jam is just gonna taste so beautiful in here. So, raspberry thumbprint cookies. I'm gonna go ahead and finish the Millionaire shortbread, or the caramel shortbread, by topping it with some melted chocolate. So I have 1 1/4 cups of chocolate chips here. I think these are a darker chocolate. They're like a semi-sweet. You can use milk chocolate. You can use a sweeter chocolate if you'd like. I like these. I don't like things too sweet. And I get these at Azure Standard. And all I'm gonna do is pop those into the microwave for a minute, and then I'll check it and I'll stir it and keep going for about 20 seconds or so until that's totally melted. And then all I have to do is pour it over here and then let that set up. And then we can move on to the last cookie. So let me pop this in the microwave. At 1 minute, we are just getting the bottom to melt. Not much going on yet at the top. So I'm gonna do 20-second intervals until it's done. And it's getting hot. The glass is getting hot, but we're still not quite there. We have more of a melt, but 20 more seconds. All right, here we go. That is nice, smooth, melted chocolate. And now just gotta pour that over the top. Hopefully it's melted enough. It should be. And then we're just gonna let that sit to firm up while we do the last batch of cookies. We're almost done. Now I'm going to try to hurry and spread this before it hardens, and I'm also going to try not to make a big mess along the outside of the pan. But that's one reason why you want that caramel layer really set up, because you know the chocolate is warm. Going out to all the edges. And then I'm going to try to make this as smooth as possible. And hope that gravity helps me along. That looks yummy. And we have our 3 layers. So we're gonna let that set up before we cut into that. Chocolate crinkle dough has been chilled long enough, so we're gonna go ahead and get those baked up. I've got also a bowl of confectioner's sugar here. This is Swerve because I have that on hand from a large purchase last year and I wanna get it used up. But you can make your own by putting sugar through a blender, or just use regular confectioner's sugar. And we're gonna make these balls into about 1-inch balls. We're gonna dip them in the white sugar and then place them about 1 inch apart on the parchment paper. Again, this is very sticky dough, so we're just gonna make that into a ball. And then roll that through the powdered sugar and onto the parchment paper. I'm using a tablespoon measure here to get about a 1-inch ball. These are like very fudgy cookies. They are really decadent, a really lovely cookie. So we'll whip right through these because I'm realizing just how long this video is going to be. Hopefully I can actually get it exported and uploaded. That's a journey all in and of itself, by the way. There's a lot to learn with making YouTube videos. I did recently get some feedback on my audio, so I really appreciate that. Keep the suggestions and the critiques coming, please, because I do enjoy this. It is a lot of work. When I started out in March of this year, I told myself I think around April timeframe is when I realized that, you know what, I really like to do the 3 things. I like to do the cooking, I like to do the gardening slash, preserving, like canning and dehydrating and stuff. And then I also like to do the freeze drying. So I committed early on to 3 videos a week. And I told myself I would do that for at least a year. So we're almost there. We're 3 months away from a year here. It is a ton of work, a lot of work. I have a full-time job and this is almost a full-time job, and I'm not complaining at all, but there's so much to learn. There's lighting, which I think I figured out recently. I think my lighting is a lot better. There's audio. I started out using just the really inexpensive, $50 mics, and one broke and left me stranded with no audio. I had to, order a new one and wait for it to come and redo a bunch of audio, which was not fun. And then that one wasn't behaving right. So then I bit the bullet and bought the DJI Mic 2, and that's what I have now. And then I've been noticing some irregularity on the audio, but I do think, and with the help from a viewer, I do think that that's because where I was wearing it, my apron kind of folds down, and I think the mic folds down with it. So I'm trying it over here today. But I did think that, oh no, I better have a backup mic just in case. So then I did purchase the Rode similar type mic, and you know, those are like $350 a piece. So that's a lot of money. I wasn't going to spend any money on YouTube until, you know, it made sense, if it ever made sense, but I was enjoying it, and audio is clearly important on videos. So hopefully moving forward, it will be better. I've changed the placement of my mic, and I do have a backup mic now just in case. So hopefully, but keep the critiques coming, please. If there's something that, you know, is really bugging you, or something that you'd like to see me incorporate, even a video you'd like to see me do, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to give it a try. Because I want to make content that people want to watch. I love doing this. So I am in sales. I've been in sales most of my adult life. The first 10 years of my adult life, I was in animal medicine. I think I might have said that before. And then on a wing and a prayer, I left that because it wasn't getting me anywhere as a single mom with a young son, and took my chance in corporate America and quickly advanced through being an admin there, to being in inside sales, to being in outside sales, to being a sales manager, to managing some of our vertical markets like Gov Ed. And then when I started having health issues, I went back into sales for a local company, so I didn't have to travel as much. And I was there for a number of years until they sold to another company. And then I moved to a different local company, which is where I'm at now. That was in 2018, and in 2020, my boss announced his retirement, and he had put me in for his replacement. Given the fact that I just had, you know, more experience, different experience than the people who currently work at the organization, or who did then, who kind of grew up there. They, you know, they were homegrown, and the ways of doing things were homegrown. So thought that I might be a breath of fresh air and just bring some innovative ideas to the organization. So I did that for a year, and then they gave me a second job on top of that. And so the first 2 years of the pandemic, I worked a lot. And then in the last year and a half, they changed my role. Now I just have one sales team that I manage, but I do all the training for them. So I manage the inside sales team, which is a new sellers, right? So I teach them how to sell. I teach them about the IT industry, everything from network to data center to wireless to security, backup, storage, things like that. All the industry partners, all the industry products, and then how to sell, how to deal with people, how to have meetings, how to have different conversations based on the buyer persona that you're working with. And so over the past year and a half, I've been creating a ton of content for work in the form of training materials. And now I'm also doing YouTube. So I feel like I create content about 24/7. But when they switched my role down to just the one sales team, I had a lot of extra time on my hands because I was working until midnight or later every night. And then all of a sudden I didn't have to. So I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do with my time? And because I'm in the kitchen all the time anyway, in the evenings, on the weekends, and I tend to talk a lot, even if it's to myself, it was suggested that I might want to put a camera in front of me so I don't look quite so crazy. And so I thought, you know what, why not? Let's give that a try. I am enjoying it, but it is a lot of work. I feel like I'm learning slowly because the time it takes to shoot and edit and upload a video, do the description, do the thumbnail, which, you know, my niece has a new job, and so I'm doing my thumbnails by myself, and I know they're not good. I am not good at thumbnails, but I'm trying, and I'm trying to get better. But there is a lot to learn. So patience is appreciated. Suggestions and constructive criticism is always appreciated. I'd like to continue doing this, but it is a ton of work, and a lot of my videos don't get a lot of views. So if you are subscribed to my channel, or if you do subscribe to my channel, please give me some comments. Please let me know what you like. Please let me know what you don't like. Let me know where you feel I can improve. Hopefully in 10 or 15 years, when I'm thinking about retirement, my channel will have grown, and I'll have something fun to do when I'm ready to stop working in corporate America. All right, let me whip through the rest of these because this is gonna be a really long video. And it's definitely less sticky if you have just a little bit of water moisture on your hands. What do we get? 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 29 cookies. Probably could have gotten 30 out of there altogether if I hadn't made the last couple so much bigger. But I'm gonna go ahead and give this a little taste. Very fudgy, that's amazing. These are going to be incredible. And they only need 10 to 12 minutes in the oven, so let's pop them in. So I let those go for the full 12 minutes plus an extra 2 minutes because they're big and I want to make sure that they're done in the middle. They look incredible. A lot of the powdered sugar has just kind of melted into the cookie. I could dust them again with some more. But I think these are just fine and they look absolutely delicious. These have to rest for a few minutes before I transfer them over to a cooling rack because they're really soft. All right, cookies are all done and this has set up beautifully. I think you can see the different layers in here. So we've got the shortbread, the caramel, and the chocolate on top. It's not smooth, that's okay. If you have a suggestion on how to make that smooth, let me know, please. But this is still gonna be fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to cut this up and then we'll do a close-up of all of the cookies and I'll tell you what I'm gonna do with those. I'm just scoring it along the top first, just to make sure that I'm getting kind of, you know, even sized pieces. That chocolate definitely set up very well and this smells incredible. I love caramel, I like a dark chocolate, and shortbread is my favorite cookie, so I really like this recipe. And once I go all the way through, then I back the knife up, making sure I've cut all the way down through that cookie layer so they'll be a little easier to pop out of the pan. We're scored all the way down, cut all the way down, so let's see if we can get them out of here. I'm actually gonna score along the edge of the pan too. Yeah, that's gonna work. I just need to get that first layer out. Okay, good. There we go. There we go. Beautiful. Again, I'm just gonna let that chocolate fall off. Oh, these look incredible. Let me get a middle piece. I mean, this piece looks great, but it's got, you know, that curved edge. Let me get a middle piece here. You get all your layers. You've got your chocolate, your caramel, and your cookie. So we've got our Millionaire shortbread, our raspberry thumbprint cookies, our candy cane cookies, our chocolate crinkle cookies, which I did put a little more powdered sugar on top. We've got our spiced oatmeal raisin, and we have our Snickerdoodles. This is going to make probably a good 8 or more cookie plates. So I will be using paper, you know, holiday paper plates like Christmas or snowman or something like that. And we'll get a few of each cookie on there and wrap it up and then take them wherever it is we're gonna be going to give out or to bring as kind of a thank you for hosting us kind of treat. But for now, I'll keep all of them in a Ziploc bag until, and stick them in the freezer until it is time to do that. But let me give you a close-up. So here we have our spiced oatmeal raisin. They came out perfect. They're really yummy. I did try this one. We've got our raspberry thumbprint cookies. Now, these are bigger than they should be just because I rolled them bigger. They're fine. But normally you want something that's probably about half that size. Here is the chocolate crinkle cookie. This is like a fudge cookie. It is absolutely delicious. We have our candy cane cookie, which is basically a sugar cookie with candy canes crunched up inside, which are pretty, but also lends to a nice pepperminty flavor in there as well. And then we have this beautiful Millionaire shortbread or caramel chocolate shortbread. And that is a nice little, and you can put as many on your plate as you want to take to somebody. This is just a sample of 2 of each. And the Snickerdoodles, oh, they came out so nice. They smell incredible. I know I normally do a taste test, but I'm full. I had dinner in between finishing and this. But I'll try a Snickerdoodle. All of these, well, except the Millionaire squares, all of those have already been tested by people in the house. I'm missing probably a dozen cookies already. So I think they've had their fill. And it's got the cinnamon and the sugar on the outside, and it's just perfect on the inside. It's nice and chewy and soft. It's delicious. Delicious. If I was gonna have another one, I would probably have the chocolate crinkle because it tastes like a brownie, a cookie brownie, a fudgy cookie brownie. Very, very decadent, very, very rich. It's very dense, like a chewy brownie on the inside. These are lovely, they're incredible. The oatmeal spiced raisin, these are delicious. You can taste the spice in them. Of course, you can taste the raisin. You can also taste the oats. But they're a delightful oatmeal raisin cookie with just that little bit of spice, you know, the spices that you're used to having around the holidays with treats. Snickerdoodles we talked about. The candy cane cookies, these came out lovely as well. They're a sugar cookie, a fun sugar cookie, a good way to use up those candy canes. Plus they put the nice little pink dots in there and just a slight little hint of peppermint in there. And that's why if you want to add just a little drop of peppermint oil, you can do that as well. Thumbprints, again, these are absolutely delicious, a little larger than normally I would make them. But this was a lot of cookies to make, so I didn't want to have to do 3 trays of them, and that's perfectly fine. Those are easy to make. I can make those anytime as soon as I make more jam, although I do have other flavors upstairs. And then, of course, these are just decadent. These are a beautiful cookie to add to a tray to give to somebody. I will probably save a few of those for my Azure driver treat for January. But yeah, we made a lot of Christmas cookies today. Thank you so much for joining me for my Christmas cookie marathon making. Really appreciate you being here. If you have any suggestions or comments, I'd love to hear them. I hope you and your family have a lovely holiday this week and that you have a wonderful New Year as well. My name is Kelly, you're at A Better Choice Homestead, and I do hope you come back and visit again soon.